Welcome to Stars and Gripes, and this week there are more activists pretending to be journalists, and it has led to a rather tense standoff between the NPR newsroom in the US and Donald Trump.
NPR has filed a First Amendment lawsuit against the Trump administration, alleging the president's efforts to defund them is a violation of the Constitution. Trump has accused NPR and PBS of bias, signing an executive order for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting to stop funding them. PBS says it's preparing to take legal action against the administration as well, but has yet to file a lawsuit.
When journalists think that they are constitutionally entitled to your tax dollars, they are just proving how out of touch they are. A president doesn't need a reason to cut funding from wherever he wants. But when you have a completely captured organisation like NPR, which is 100% filled with activist journalists, why wouldn't a president intervene? The last thing tax dollars should ever be used for is activism and politically motivated smears. Feel free to start a private company and do whatever you want. That's freedom. But the people shouldn't be forced to give you a cent. Now, predictably, NPR is now pretending to be extremely balanced, and in this interview with their CEO, Katherine Maher.
The White House and some Republicans in Congress, as you well know, have accused NPR of promoting a liberal bias. Beyond that, the former NPR editor, Uri Berliner, he accused the network of having what he called a lack of viewpoint diversity. How do you respond to those critiques?
Well, I first of all respond by saying we're a nonpartisan news organization. We seek to be able to provide a range of different viewpoints in terms of who we bring on air, the stories that we tell. We're buttressed in this effort by the fact that we have 200 local newsrooms across the country.
Okay, so their CEO is politically neutral. I wonder how she would explain this tweet then from 2020. Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Garda. Caught with a Biden hat in 2020 on the very day that America went to cast their vote, advocating for Joe Biden to win the race. It doesn't scream neutrality to me.
It certainly doesn't, Jack. Great to be with you as always. And she was in a hearing on Capitol Hill not too long ago where a lot of her tweets were put up and she had to explain them. And she's very smart. She knows what she's doing. And she sort of acknowledged all of them and then tried to say, well, that's my personal opinion. It doesn't affect how I perform as an executive and, all those tricks in the book. But I think you're absolutely right. I call this First Amendment convenience, where they try to use that and levy that to defend against anything, whether it's the sector, the university sector, et cetera, that the current administration is going after. It doesn't make sense. There's nothing in the Constitution that mandates tax dollar allocations. But yet we do see this judicial activism where these arguments are getting favorable review from different judges and everything's running up to the Supreme Court. So I would not be surprised if something along those lines happens here, even though this argument is obviously absurd.
Oh, yeah. And this whole notion that the CEO of a very large media organisation can literally endorse a candidate but then say, oh, that's my personal profile, although you use that profile to tweet about work and then all your staff see it. So they all know what the boss likes. Everybody knows what the boss thinks. Surely that must proliferate through the newsroom.
It absolutely does. And there's all sorts of people who've analyzed the stories that NPR does, or whether it's the ABC here or BBC in the UK. Nobody's fooled by it. We know it. And I think this is the first time that you're seeing somebody actually push back and talk about defunding them, which I think is a wide open argument available to the right side of politics in every country. But for some reason, nobody wants to really go in and take this issue on by the jugular. But we're seeing it now with this administration.
Yeah, good. Take their money. Take every cent of tax dollar funds from them, in my opinion. Now, the media is running a major campaign to back in Harvard in the funding dispute with Donald Trump. And the argument has similarities to the NPR one, that these institutions are somehow entitled to your money. But on MSNBC, they let slip what it's really about. Watch the guest grin and speak with glee about the fact that some races are being openly discriminated against when it comes to admissions.
There are no seats left for Americans. And you combine that with the critique of race-based admissions. This is about, really, these institutions, Chris, trying to build a student body that reflects not only the diversity of the country, but the diversity of the world. And Trump stoking a particular kind of grievance because people like him their children can't seem to get into Harvard like they used to. They can't get into the Columbias and the Princetons like they used to. They're having difficulty getting into the Lehighs and the Williams like they used to. They believe they possess these institutions. And so, by virtue of their particular positions of power, they are trying to, in some ways, capture them once again.
How brazen do you have to be to openly admit that on national television? Now, Kosher, the reason that some people are not getting in as easily into these universities is because there's well-documented open discrimination against certain races, including Asian Americans and, of course, white Americans. And the whole point of this funding dispute, the reason why the left is so riled up, is because they're asking for accountability on one of these points, and then obviously how many spaces are going to people from foreign countries. Taxpayers are funding that to a degree. It's a completely legitimate question, which I cannot believe the level of dishonesty that some journalists are deploying to look at it.
100%. I think a lot of them just can't, honestly and genuinely can't get their arms around the issue because they've been trained for half a century to believe that this is some kind of entitlement for them, and there is a structural injustice, and we need many, many more centuries in the opposite direction of favoritism to one group over another to right these past sins. That is what they believe, and that's why they speak it so clearly and openly, as you say, unabashedly. This issue is also very, very interesting because similar to the last one, it is this administration willing to fight dirty and to take on institutions that are very politically lopsided, very much into setting up activism and enabling that from their student base, defying the Supreme Court ruling that came down and said they were engaging in discriminatory practices with Asian Americans, as you mentioned, and white Americans, and they've been kind of defying that, not covertly, but overtly in their practices. And the one mechanism that the federal government has is money. So that's what they're trying to do, that you are no longer necessarily entitled to billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars, American taxpayer dollars, and tax-exempt status and all of these things. And that's where this is really hitting a flashpoint now, this issue. He's making an example of Harvard specifically, and it's going to be very interesting to see this story continue to unfold.
And Kosher, I've found it absolutely extraordinary that you've got all these left-wing journalists who are actually taking the position of defending one of the most elite and privileged institutions on this planet. And it's a position that you would think that they would want that funding returned to local schools that are struggling in impoverished areas. It is extraordinary and I think inconsistent from an ideological point of view that they want this money to go to Harvard, to this privileged place, rather than probably being better spent in the education system elsewhere.
So Republicans are rejoicing at this strategy of theirs. They're like, yes, please go and defend Harvard, shout from the rooftops, defend Harvard, because that is going to really play well with the constituency that they lost, that they used to have, working class Americans that have completely shifted from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party in the last 4 or 8 or even 12 years, slowly and then rapidly. And as you say, this is one of the most wealthy institutions that epitomizes elitism, and there is this class divide that's only been widening in America in recent times. They have $52 billion in their endowment fund that they enjoy capital gains on tax-free, so on and so forth. So this is not consistent ideologically with where the party's roots were, as you mentioned, and it's also not smart politically, and I think the other side of the aisle is really enjoying this because they have no way but to win on this issue.
Well, moving on now, because Michelle Obama is doing a podcast circuit and she is really tackling all the big issues.
Sometimes I get in the bed and I'm freezing.
Yes.
And other times it's like, oh my God, take my skin off.
It's like the change in temperature is wild. For any woman, anytime, but especially at this age.
It's a battle with a partner, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's always cold. And I'm like, do not touch. And sometimes I wake up hot and I'll wake him up. Did you touch the thermostat? You touched the thermostat, didn't you? He's like, it didn't, I swear to God. He now knows. He's afraid of the thermostat. I said, I don't care what you do. Do not touch anything in this room.
Kosher, compelling stuff, isn't it?
She has invented a whole new genre called throwing shade on Barack Obama. Like every single episode, there's something. We've heard about how marriages can have a bad decade. We've heard about how she was angered that people have to leap over her to shake her husband's hand because he was only commander-in-chief for 8 years. And now he's some kind of weakling who can't handle the cold, is what she's intimating there. I don't think he would appreciate this. And it's really, really interesting, not only because it's not interesting, to your point, the podcast is not doing well, even though she's somebody who has been successful with her previous podcast and her book. This one is flailing. And then on top of that, it's sort of like she's giving off some kind of anger or just resentment in her marriage that she's had to one of the most powerful men on planet Earth. And I don't think people find that very relatable.
Yeah, really weird stuff, but we love to see it. Coach Agata, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights.